I better help that customer. I better make some money. So I'm going to run the call exactly the same if it was 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's just the little things that nobody likes to do. You got to have consistency on it. And I guarantee you'll win. And I always say this, without discipline, you will never start. And without consistency, you will never finish. So you got to have both. You have to have all three, but mainly discipline and consistency.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you one more time and finally on some high quality mics. So apologize for some previous technical difficulties, but we're back in it and hopefully it is sounding great. And if not, too bad, because it's still our voices and we can't make anything about that. So the best we can do is give you high quality audio and high quality guests. And none other than Mr. Mario Martinez is going to be joining us today, Vice President of Service Minds, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, out of the southeastern portion of the country. And he is going to be talking to us about the 3 keys of running a successful call. It's going to be good stuff. But of course, before we do that, Brian and I are going to spend a little time ourselves. We're going to turn to Brian for our quote.
Genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Thomas Edison.
Good old Thomas Edison. So there's a man who knew plenty about perspiration. If I recall, he tried well over thousands of different elements to get the best one for a light bulb.
Yeah, it was, what did he say? He tried 1,000 different ways to get it, and a reporter or a journalist asked him, "You failed 999 times. What made you keep going?" And he said, "I didn't fail at all. I just found 999 ways it wouldn't work."
Yeah, right.
Right. Which could be another quote for this episode, but 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, sweat. It's work. And Mario and I talk often, don't see each other as much as we'd like, usually a couple times a year. But we have kind of been on the journey together in leadership. He may have become a manager like a year before I did. And we've really been on this journey together. And this is our third time trying to get him on. He maybe didn't book the first time, second time booked and had to reschedule. And then this time said, we took a little shot at him a couple weeks ago. I don't remember what episode that was, but a few weeks ago, we took a shot at him and said, we don't mention that name on this show because he hasn't come on yet. And then he called me while I was driving here the other day and apologized and said, let's make it happen. So I'm like, well, we got an opening this week, my man.
Is that how that works? Because we could call out a couple other people Joe Rogan, we've tried to schedule him like 15 times.
The name we don't mention on this show because he won't come on here. Jocko Willink, David Goggins.
Jocko.
Elon. Freaking Jordan Peterson. Last time I say his name.
I can't wait for the bookings to come in here next week. It's going to be good.
Finally. They're all going to call my cell while I'm driving. It's going to be great.
What's going to be great is the topic today, which is 3 keys to running a successful call or making sure that you're making the most of every call. And it's a good time. It's a good time to be focusing on that and making sure that those keys are keys that you're applying.
Yeah, and that's one thing Mario and I always talk about is like where the quote came from is like doing the work, like busting your butt, be it in a truck or in a leadership role. It's more common than not that a person gets into a leadership role, at least in the skilled trades, but probably in general. And they finally get there and it is time to relax. I made it, baby. It's time to chill. And the learning stops and the growing stops. The audiobooks stop. The music gets put on. The hands get folded or the fingers get interlocked behind the head, so to speak. And he's never been one to do that, man. He's a mover and a shaker and keeps me motivated. And he's also super gracious and super helpful. You and I have had multiple FaceTime chats with him where he's helped walk us through things, and he's always giving of his time, and really he's one of those guys that would help a competitor if asked. Like, he's just giving. So I'm very stoked about finally having him on the show. He has pretty severe thunderstorms in Florida where he's at right now. So I'm not 100% on how great the quality on his end is going to be. But let me tell you something, podcast audience, Waste No Dares, whatever we call you. I don't care. We got to get him on here because he has not been easy to nail down for a podcast interview. So we're running with it.
Yeah, man, he's a good guy, and I'm excited about what he's going to be talking about today. He has a ton of experience, not only as a plumber in the field, but he has been in a wide variety of leadership positions and currently sits as the vice president of Benjamin Franklin Service Mines out of Florida right now. So he's got plenty to give, and it's going to be a good show.
It's going to be a great show because I know he's going to give of himself on this like he always does, and he's probably put some really good stuff together because he's a worker. Like, he's going to grind even when it means getting ready to do a podcast interview. And I was, I go back from time. We're just going to make this the Brian Tracy podcast that he's not actually on at some point, as much as I talk about Brian Tracy, but he's the single person that I've spent the most time studying, and audiobooks I've listened to the most, and even some real books that I've read over the years, when it was difficult to find Audible stuff in the early 2000s. And he has this formula called the 40 plus formula. And it pertains to the, 99% perspiration quote, where he talks about it's the 40 plus formula. The 40 hours a week that you work is to survive. Every hour you work after that is for your growth, development, and future. So that means, and he doesn't necessarily mean the number of hours per se, but like whatever the company requires of you. So if you're in an organization where, maybe we're about to hit the shoulder season in the HVAC world, so maybe you're going to get down to 36 hours. That 36 hours is what you work to survive. Every hour you put in after that, be it at work or into personal development and growing and reading and listening to books and podcasts and role playing on your time, every hour you spend after that is going to determine how far you go in life. I don't just mean financially, although, that's the main focus of this show, but I do mean in all aspects of your personal development. But we'll keep it at the financial world. Every hour you put into yourself after that is your growth and your development. And like, what you're learning on the job is good, but when you study yourself outside of the job, be it your sales, be it your technical ability, whatever you do, that aspect of it, you learn so much more, so much faster in that part than you do actually on the job. So it's like compounded. So Brian said that they did a survey on self-made millionaires, not meaning like they had no team or whatever, but self-made meaning they didn't come from anything and nothing was given to them. The average self-made millionaire, average across all platforms, however they made their money, works 59 hours a week. So how many are you working? And again, don't just mean punching in, punching out. I mean, how many hours outside of the 40 or whatever you work at work are you dedicating to put into yourself after work? That's the extra. That's where the other 19 a week needs to come from if you're really planning on making it big.
Great stuff there, Brian. And that's absolutely more of what we want to hear from you, from our guests, and from all future podcasts here. But for right now, it's time for that special time, which is the review of the week. Brian, who are we looking at today?
Killer Contractor Podcast. 5 stars. Waste No Day provides tremendous value to me personally. When I want to hear from industry experts and leaders, I listen to Brian and Nate drop industry knowledge with the best in the business. I can't say enough about these guys. I look forward to the podcast every time I see it drop on my feed. Keep it up, gentlemen. Sales CEO.
Oh, the CEO of sales has reviewed the podcast.
I didn't know the Sales Game had a CEO, but now I'm mildly offended that I'm not even I wasn't even interviewed. I didn't even get to interview for it.
You're the executive vice president of sales.
Executive VP. All right, I'll take that. Is that above or below the CEO? That's going to be below the CEO. Huh?
I'll let the CEO tell you about that.
So my boss just left us an awesome review. Love it. Yo, thank you, Sales CEO. Appreciate you listening to the show and downloading it every week, because the downloads are the scorecard, right? So when you download some episodes, that tallies up for the week, and we get to see that. When you get friends and family members to download some episodes and give them a listen, that's the scorecard. Probably the more important scorecard is what the sales CEO also did here, which means a tremendous amount to Nate and me, which is actually take the time to scroll down on Apple Podcasts and write a review about what the show means to you. If you're not on Apple, go to Spotify, just click the 5 stars. We appreciate that too. A lot of people, maybe I should shout their names out one day, but a lot of people hit the Spotify 5 stars and then just shoot me a Facebook message and say, hey, I don't listen on Apple, but I wanted you to see that I did a Spotify review. So we appreciate you guys too. But if you don't want to do anything, but just listen and consume and give nothing back whatsoever, we still love you, man. And we appreciate your time.
Absolutely. We appreciate that, sales CEO. And like Brian said, if you appreciate what you're hearing here, make sure that you give us a shout out. We'd sure love to hear it. For now, though, it's time to hear from our main man, Mario Martinez, and it's time to put him in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Mario Martinez. His career at Benjamin Franklin Plumbing began in 2005 when he joined as a senior plumbing technician. He quickly rose through the ranks, starting with the leadership team as field supervisor and ending up as operations manager. In 2019, he was promoted again to COO of Benjamin Franklin Plumbing and 1 Hour Air Conditioning. In this position, he oversaw the day-to-day operations of all departments, totaling more than 95 team members. During his tenure, he's helped the company achieve growth by leading it through a number of challenges, operational upgrades, business transformations, and turnarounds. And he's accomplished this by applying a disciplined approach to organizational strategy, execution, value creation, and most importantly, the nurturing of our company culture and team development. As a result, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing and 1 Hour Air has become one of the leading residential home services companies in the Tampa Bay area. That said, he has to acknowledge the talented team that he has been an honor. That said, he has to acknowledge the talented team that has been an honor for him to lead. And now he is yet again promoted to now the vice president of Benjamin Franklin Plumbing Service Mines, which services the Florida area and portions of Alabama and Georgia. During his free time, he enjoys spending time with his wife and his son and their 2 dogs, and also enjoys the occasional golf, sports, reading, or simply spending time with friends. Welcome to the show, Mario.
Thank you for the invite. I couldn't resist after that comment on the last show.
What do you mean you couldn't resist? You've resisted how many times now? We've this is what, the 3rd episode we set up?
No, it's the second. The first
it's the third. And the first one that Mario didn't reschedule. We appreciate that, buddy. Maybe the first one he said, yes, I'll do it, and then never got around to it.
Maybe.
The second one we scheduled, and then he said he had to reschedule. And yeah, I know how it goes, buddy. It's all right. We're glad to have you on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mario, it's good to have you on the show, man. And we are glad, despite how long it took you to get here, but we are glad to have you on. And we're excited to talk to you about the cool things that you're doing in the plumbing industry in Florida. But of course, we always like to hear a little bit about our guests, their background. So how did you get into the trades? When did you start? What did your upbringing look like? Did you grow up in Florida? Kind of give us the story tour there.
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from Massachusetts, Springfield. A little bit after I was like 7 years old, somewhere around there, we moved to Puerto Rico for about 10 years. Then after that, we moved back home to Springfield, Max. I'm a third generation plumber. So I've been doing plumbing pretty much all my life. Loved doing plumbing all my life since I was a kid. Um, Grew up doing plumbing with my grandfather mainly, going, doing service call, doing commercial jobs, doing industrial jobs. Um, so shortly after,
In Massachusetts.
in Massachusetts, yeah. Yes, that's correct. So a little bit after, years later, I went to college. I went for criminal justice. I get a bachelor in criminal justice. But it wasn't quite what I wanted to do. So I had an opportunity to go back and work with my grandfather. Work with him for many years. Then after that, I had an opportunity to move to Florida. I moved to Florida it's been 18, 19 years ago. And ever since, I've been here in Florida, of course. First I worked for a company named Tom Shell Plumbing, and I learned a lot from him about the Florida way of doing plumbing. It's totally different than up north. Up north, plumbers gotta be journeyman plumbers, and you gotta be licensed and things like that. In Florida, you don't need any of that. So it's surprising, the type of the plumbing they use and the type how they do plumbing down here is totally different. Nevertheless, a year later, that company unfortunately went bankrupt. But I had a great relationship with the owner, and the owner knew Scott Vigu down here in Florida. That's 18 years ago. So he drove me personally to Scott's office back then and introduced me to him. And my journey with Benjamin Franklin started there 18 years ago.
Awesome. So you ended up becoming GM for Scott Vigu. So you started as a plumber there and then worked your way up.
Yes, that's a great question. I started as a plumber there for about 6 months. 6 months later or so, I became a field supervisor for Scott. Shortly after, I got the opportunity of becoming the service manager, then the operations manager. Then I got the opportunity to be the operations manager for both Ben Franklin and 1 Hour, which I did for quite a few years. Um, then after that, I got the opportunity to become his general manager for both for 1 Hour and Ben, and then his COO shortly after. So I've been through every phase of the company, every leadership position, which has been a great journey in my, the knowledge that I learned. So many people that I've met that I've learned from it. So yeah.
All right. Well, be honest. Which is better, turning wrenches in the truck or sitting behind the desk?
I tell you, one is you always miss. Once you're a plumber, you're always a plumber. So I always love to go visit jobs, and once I go visit jobs, I'm working with the guys. So I love doing that behind the desk. I like troubleshooting stuff. I like on challenges. I love taking things apart and putting it back together. And you can do that on both sides. That's the beauty of it, right? So I like both, honestly. I truly do. I love the office side. I love the challenges. I love helping others, training others, developing leaders, um, and I love teaching the technical part as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have plenty of opportunity to do that because just a few years ago, Vigu was bought out or acquired by Service Mines, which expanded your territory from the Tampa local region to the entire state of Florida and beyond. Is that right?
That is correct. Great opportunity. Scott Vigu, I respect the guy so much. I learned so much from him. He's an amazing mentor to me, an amazing leader. But he had the opportunity to sell out, and he did, and that opened the doors for not just for me, for my team. The team that I had opened the door for every single one of them to expand and grow. When you're small like that, even though that we were doing close to $30 million between both Ben and 1 Hour. Um, you small. There's so far that you can go, right? And same thing with your team. You can always grow with knowledge and things like that. But as far as it's giving position opportunity for growth, you're limited. So with Service Mind, that gives the opportunity to move up, to continue to grow and give others the opportunity to grow and continue, this journey of becoming more than what we are.
And what you are right now is a business that is well north of the $80 million mark. What type of revenue? I believe you're in the nine figures, if I recall. What type of revenue are you looking to do this year?
Just in plumbing alone, we're gonna hit close to 30 million. Overall in Service
Okay.
Mind, we're gonna do close to 170 million.
Amazing. That's incredible. That's just huge. And your coverage area is a vast majority of the southeastern portion of the country. If I recall, Florida, Alabama, parts of Georgia, and I'm sure you're expanding from there. So a massive market with a ton of huge metros in that area and all the opportunity in the world. And it's awesome to hear that you speak of that so favorably. And of course, the opportunities that not only afforded to you, but to your team and those who are forthcoming to be on your team. And that's, of course, some of the stuff that we want to talk about with you today. We're focusing on the topic around how to be maximizing the call, making the most out of each call. Our podcast does have a ton of technician listeners, and so we always like to have elements or entire podcasts or at least parts of the show that are focused on those ears that are listening. And of course, everybody's running calls, maybe at this time of year, not as many calls as we would like to be running, depending on what market you're in. There's certainly been some downturn in the trades. I think that's pretty apparent at this point, which makes it all the more important that you get the most out of every call. And I understand that you have kind of three keys to making the most out of each call. So highlight or summarize those three keys for us, and then we'll jump into key one and dig in.
Yeah. I think there's opportunity in every call, no matter what. Everybody calls us, and we start judging the calls, right? Everybody does, right? But when you're looking at the bright side, is another opportunity. It doesn't matter if it's a warranty callback, service request, or a BSA, or how we call a plumbing inspection. It doesn't matter. Every call is an opportunity, but everything starts with one thing. Everything starts with training. I'm a strong believer in training. I'm a strong believer in knowing your craft, and I'm a strong believer in going back. And we've been talking about for a while here. Corporate has been talking about. I think Brian, you and I were talking about when we saw each other last time. It's just going back to the basics. You got to continue going back to the basics, and not taking shortcuts. So training on a daily basis is one of the most important things we can do as leaders and our technicians. I was a technician myself, and when I came to work for Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, we were coming to trainings and 3 times, 4 times a week, and at the beginning, I was like, what the hell is this? I just want to go and do some plumbing. And then it started clicking to me, if I try this thing they teach me, what is going to be the results? Let me just try. And I started trying it over and over and over. And I failed many times, and I redid it. And I failed many times and I redid it, and they keep giving me feedback, training. I applied it. And back then, as a technician, when I was in the field, I did over $1 million in sales back then, and that was almost with no installers, to do the installations, just by following the training.
Yeah, and based on today's inflation rates, that's probably like $5 million.
Yeah, right. No kidding. But I told my boss, back then, his name was Paul Dollar. If you're telling me if I follow these steps, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna make money. And he was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." I'll and I did for many years. I had a great mentor as well. His name is Dan Chevette. He's a technician. He still works for me today. And he was amazing in the field, by the book. And I copy a lot from him, so I owe him a lot of what I know. And it, I just follow the steps. And I continue training myself, continue going to training, continue going to events, learning from other, and of course surrounding yourself by people smarter than you. I think is very important.
Yeah, that's not hard in Brian's case. He does that just naturally.
I do that when I'm alone somehow.
Yeah, and I think
So,
I think training is one of those things that is so easy to overlook. It's so easy to put by the wayside. Sometimes you slip into those cost saving mentality, and you're like, okay, well let's cut out training. We can't afford to train the guys. We don't have enough calls as it is, and that's really to the detriment of the outcome of the call, because that training, assuming that the training is good and is structured and has an objective and is focused on actually developing the technicians, which if you're not doing that, you need to revise your training schedule. But assuming that it's high quality training, that's one of the most important things that you can be doing. I mean, why do you think quarterbacks watch so many hours of tape, and the coaches and the defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators, they watch hours and hours and hours of tape as training, and then on top of that they go and practice and practice and practice and practice, all for what? To play a 60-minute game, like an entire week's worth of training to play a 60-minute game. And we've talked about it so many times before in the show. We're completely opposite. We train for an hour to play a week's worth of games, and that's something that it can't be overlooked. There's already so little amount of time and money invested in training to play that many games at once. To take it out or to to get rid of it or hit the pause button, that could have dire effects towards your team. And so I love hearing you not only speak encouragingly, but really double down on that as an element of success.
Yeah, and if you really think about the principle of the winner's edge, which they're usually, Brian, I would hear Brian Tracy talking about this a lot back in the day. Was the principle of the winner's edge is, if you're talking about a horse race, the horse that wins in a picture, what do they call that? A picture finish, photo finish, where they actually have to look at the photo to see which horse won, could win by like a quarter of an inch and win 100 times the prize money for the rider and the owner. And, one goes on to be a champion and crowned and remembered in history forever. And the other one is forgotten and never heard of again. And it's the same in football. Oftentimes these huge games like a Super Bowl can come down to a running back just barely getting that ball over the line by an inch and winning the game for a 2-point conversion that puts them up 1. And, the prize money difference there is it's lifelong. You got a Super Bowl ring. You can go play for any team in the league now. The money, the difference in the money you make is just, I don't even know that you can actually do the math on it. And just like the horse will win, I don't know, 100 times the purse. It doesn't mean the horse is 100 times better, right? That's the winner's edge. It doesn't mean that running back was 100 times better than that defense. It was a fraction of an inch better. And that usually comes down to a little bit more training, just being better, slightly better than a handful of things, or maybe slightly better at everything. And that is why, like Mario and I were talking about, that was here, right? In Arizona?
I believe so.
Where we were hanging out last time?
Yeah. Yeah, that was there. Yeah, Arizona.
Yeah, at the convention here. I was talking to somebody today who was like, yeah, everybody's all hyped about the conventions. And he's like, I don't think they're that big a deal. I'm like, bro, then you're not doing it right. Because if you're not leaving with notepads full of notes from your conversations with other people, and it can be other people bigger, smaller, the same size, significantly smaller, like just having conversations with owners, managers that you run into there, and other technicians, even when you're fortunate enough to do that, to hear for me to just ask the same question with everybody. It's like, what are you doing that's working? And scratching down the notes, but that's like the convention and hanging out with guys like you. For me, that's one thing that's going to make me slightly better. And maybe that's going to get me just barely over that end zone line with the football when it counts, is some one-off conversation that you and I had about training. But but that's why you go back to it. You go back to it to hone the skill and sharpen the edge the slightest bit in some way that puts you over the finish line before, maybe it's your competitor. Maybe you don't think in those terms, but to put you over the finish line as opposed to stopping just short of it. So that's what the training is for. So glad you brought that up, buddy. And let's keep moving.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. It's something that you both mentioned. Nate was talking about sports. I love using sports as an example of training. Using any athlete is spending hours, a lifetime, to play an hour game. And you got to continue to train and build your skills in order to play a great game. And another thing that you mentioned, Brian, was going to convention and talking to others. People don't realize you can have direct or indirect training is how you want to take it, right? In talking to others and learning from others, that's training for yourself, knowledge for yourself, so you can share it back with your team. And again, if you're just writing it down on a notepad and just putting it on the side after convention or after any event or anything that you participate with, it's not going to do no good. You got to share those notes. You got to share those experiences with others, to have a reward. That's the ultimate goal, right? Is to generate more revenue, not just for the company, for ourselves and our families, right? And in order to do that, we got to make sure that we don't skip the steps. We got to make sure that we're doing the little things that nobody else likes to do the right way without skipping any steps.
Yeah, I love that, Mario. And so, key one to making the most out of the call is training. Before we move on to key two, you mentioned something earlier about how when you first got there to an environment where training was a big piece of the culture, you were like, what is this about? Kind of that cynical or sarcastic approach. And if it's hard to imagine anybody who's listening to Waste No Day would have that viewpoint, but I suppose there might be some doubters out there, or perhaps this is the first time that they're tuning in. And maybe they also have that type of like cynical view of training, like, I'm too good for this, or like, this is a waste of time. So speaking from your personal experience, how did you change your mind when you were a technician, when you were a plumber in the field? How did you change your mind and perspective on the value of training? Did you eventually start seeing the results, or did you have an epiphany? Did somebody slap you across the face? What was it that brought about the change where you started seeing not only the value in the training, but also the value in the outcome the training was providing you?
Yes, that's a great question. To me, was again going back to Dan Chevette. That it was a technician with me back then, and I rode with him so many times, and I saw him applying the training that he was learning on every single call. He was so by the book, and he worked for him. Not only he was making more money for himself, he was building relationship with customers where customers were calling him back almost on a daily basis, repeat customers. So I just said, I'm just gonna try that. I got to do that. He's making more money. He's building relationship. Customer continue to call him back. He's happier, when he close a call and help somebody. I got to try that, and I continue to try that. And I continue to do it, and I had to modify so many times. The key was that I continued to do it. I didn't give up, which at the beginning, of course, was hard, and I would go back and I'll say, "Well, this is not working for me. I just gotta find the way that's gonna work for me, my approach." I still have a challenge, which is I got a strong accent. So communication was difficult for me with customers at the time. Two things: I wanted to be accepted by them, and at the same time, I wanted to provide that same level of service that Dan was doing with his customers. Um, and of course, the ultimate goal, of course, I wanted to close every call, help the customer, and of course, help the company, help myself, and so on. And I just didn't give up, and I continued doing it. I continue training. I continue just doing whatever I can, getting feedback, doing a lot of role playing. I would role play with myself. I would role play with my wife. I would role play with Dan. You know, I just wanted to win. And I feel like I was losing. Um, Dan, because I see the other guys following the process, and I want to be better than that. I know I can do better than that. Yeah, I did it, and it was like a light bulb. After that, I didn't want to stay on the same position. After that, my goal was just like Brian was saying, just be a little bit better than yesterday, every day, every day, every day.
So if I'm hearing you right, I'm a cynical tech, or I just don't believe in training. You're saying give it a chance, trust the process, believe in the training, let it actually affect you. Start actually bringing into your day, your call, elements of the training. Like, don't just sit there like a bump on a log and let it wash over you. Internalize it. Actually do something about it. I mean, yeah, of course training's not going to work if you just put it on like noise in the background, punch the time clock for 30 minutes and then roll out. You have to actually sit there in a coachable mode. You have to be willing to learn, willing to listen, and then the most important part, willing to apply.
Yeah, the willing to listen part is where some people can get caught up, because they kind of get the eyes glossing over during the training. Not my training, Nate's training, but they kind of look like they didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night, and they're not. It's a very clear sign that they're not engaging with the training. And I've been through some pretty boring trainings in my day, and by far my all-time favorite trainer is Brian Tracy, and I force him upon anyone I'm training. Like, you've got to dig into Brian Tracy. And what's the same reaction I get every time, Nate Minnick?
Oh man, I don't need none of that stuff.
He's so dry. He's so monotone. I like, Grant Cardone. He's more fun. Eric, I can't remember his last name right
Thomas.
now. But the more charismatic guys, the more energetic guys, the Eric Thomas, ET. They're hype guys, and they are more fun to listen to, and they have some great content. But if you want someone who's going to, while you're in the seat of your truck and you've gone through all the Waste No Day episodes 3 or 4 or 15 times, and then left us a nice review with every phone in your house, even your kids, then you listen to something like Brian Tracy, because what he's going to do is he's going to help you build from scratch your presentation. This is what he did for me. He helped me not just like create my presentation, but put things in my presentation that even today, when I train things I was doing in like 2006, they blow people's mind. They're like game changers for people. And it's the result of, I've heard all of Brian Tracy's stuff over and over and over again. Like, if I listen to a Brian Tracy audiobook right now, it's going to be the 5th or 6th to 30th or 40th time I've heard it. So I'm not hearing anything really new. Now I'm listening again, and I'm just having the opportunity to really like get creative with the things I'm hearing. And this is where you want to get to. The stuff that he trains and good trainers train it can get pretty high level, and that can make it feel boring. But if you're really trying to engage in it and trying to take the material and apply it to what you're going to do in your truck today, it's life-changing. I mean, people have put hundreds to thousands of hours into, to tens of thousands of hours even, into crafting the training that will help you craft a presentation or your financial situation or your home life or whatever it is you're listening to or reading or studying, so that you can make life as perfect as you can possibly make it, foregoing unforeseen circumstances that you can't control. So, and I was training a group of awesome electricians here in Phoenix this morning, hanging out with some guys at Mr. Sparky, Aaron Hagen's Phoenix Mr. Sparky's, Dustin Seaton, who's the vice president of operations, is here in town. And I want to give a couple of these guys shout outs because I just had such a good time with them this morning. Kyle, Jerry, Ian, Daniel, man, I wish I could remember all their names. I'm sure I'll remember once we're off. Omar, just great dudes. And as I'm training these guys, they're nodding, they're hungry, like they're loving it. But I'm keeping it pretty entertaining, right? I know how quickly I'll fall asleep to someone's training, no matter how good the training is. Like, you have to, for me, you kind of have to keep it on that level of entertaining. So I'm going to make a couple jokes at my own expense or Nate's expense and, just keep things alive. But I really feel like you have to mix in some things like a Brian Tracy type trainer that's high level and super smart, and not necessarily scratching your entertainment itch, but force yourself into things like that where it's not that fun. It's not that comfortable, but it's the stuff that you're going to learn the most from. And training is the exact same way. So you don't have to feel like doing it. You just have to do it. Nobody in the NFL is going to tell you they love practice, right? It's the least fun part of their job. They're getting hurt while they're not even on TV. Oftentimes they're beating their body, just obliterating their body, mind. They're getting sick in the heat, and like, dude, this torture. It's literal torture to get to their level. And we don't have to get to that level, but we got to get to a level. Like, you've got to carve out your own time to get better. Listening to this show, that's a great start. It's just putting you way ahead of the pack nationally, because most technicians, managers, owners don't have time for things like this. Please. They're busy. And when they're not, they're on social media or whatever, screwing around. So just starting with that is putting you ahead of the pack, but you really got to carve out personal time to get better. Like Mario said, he's role playing with his wife. He's role playing with his old mentor, to find people who will do that with you. And oftentimes we say the spouse or someone at home, because most people in your life aren't going to give you that time. They got stuff going on, and your success, I know you hate to hear it, not that important to them. You're in charge of that. So you got to get that figured out. But your spouse, your significant other, your kids, they're going to care about your success because it directly impacts them. So use it.
All right. So key number 1, focus on training, believe in training, apply training. Where do we go from there, Mario?
We go to discipline from there, right? Just like we're talking about training. And I want to mention something else about training, because this is most of our branch managers, most of operations managers, GMs, and so on that we talk with, visit, and we share a lot of information between each other. But there's always one thing in common, right? Training is not effective, and one of the reasons why is because they don't get prepared. They want their technicians to close every call. They want their technicians to do the best as they can with every call, generate, upsell, and do things like that. But they're not willing to invest their own time preparing for the proper training. It takes at least 4 to 6 hours to build a 1-hour training. And before delivering that training, you should get prepared, learn, just know exactly what you expecting everybody to learn, and what is the expectations that you want to get out of that training from your people. Once you continue doing that, right, you got to create that discipline. That's why I love discipline. It's like going to the gym. right? And most people expect that I'm gonna get in shape in a week, right? But we know this going to take time before you start seeing a difference in your body. You know, we know that you got to eat different. We know that you got to continue changing your exercises, and same thing with what we do in business. You know, you got to discipline yourself. You got to hold yourself accountable to learn the craft. You got to continue doing it over and over and over and over again until it becomes a just part of your routine, part of your life. It's not so much a task; it's something that you enjoy doing, right? Um, I, I love. I don't know if you guys read this book by David Goggins. You Can Hurt Me. Great book. If you're doing stuff that you don't like doing, but if you continue doing it, you can see the transformation of it. You know, so yeah, discipline for me is very important with everything that we do in business, in the field, in the office, in the warehouse, in how we deliver the part to the job site. You know, it's everything.
So I hear what you're saying there, Mario, and discipline is one of those things that everybody likes to talk about. Like, oh yeah, you got to have discipline, but then when it comes to actual real world life application, in the privacy of your own home, in the privacy of your own life, and specifically in the privacy of your own calendar, the determination becomes far less apparent, right? And the priority levels start dropping pretty quickly, because discipline by nature is something that we look to avoid. I mean, from the very beginnings of our lives, discipline is a word that we don't like. It has generally negative connotations behind it. You do something wrong, you get disciplined. You hear your mom say, like, you have to do your homework. It's a discipline of being a better student. You hear your dad say, like, go out and mow the yard. When I was a boy, I didn't have the same luxury you did. Have a little discipline in your life, right? And like it's just this negative messaging over and over and over. So no surprise that when we enter adulthood, that somebody talks about discipline, and we're like, all right. So any other ideas about how I can get better? So, I mean, from your perspective, Mario, you're a disciplined guy. I know you enjoy some time at the gym, and obviously you had to be disciplined in your career to rise through the ranks as you did. What was it that clicked in your mind? Maybe you always were that disciplined guy, and you were God's gift to mankind when it came to being responsible and not having any problems with it. But what was it in your mind that clicked, and you just said, like, okay, I know this is hard, but I'm willing to do hard things. I know this is not what I want to do, but I know I have to do it to get what I actually want.
It was definitely my grandfather. The reason why I have so much discipline, and everything that I do today, everything that I continue to do, and it literally changed my life. So this is a funny story, not so funny, but my grand I needed I was going to college, and I needed money to buy books. My I think the total back, it was like close to $500 back then, that I needed, to buy books for college. And I went to my grandfather, which I know he was very wealthy, back then, and I asked him, can you please help me out to buy this book? I don't have the money right now, but I promise you I'll pay you back. Um, and he was like, sure, no problem. He reached out to his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill. And I was looking at him, and I was like, what's, give me $5. And he knows that it's over $500. So, you know, I handed $5 back to him, and I said, here, you need this more than I do. I went out and I figured it out. I got the money. I bought the books. I was so mad at him for years. Years later, we're talking. I'm talking to my grandfather, and I'm telling him the story of what happened then, and he remembered exactly what he did. And he told me, you figure it out, right? You bought the books." And I say, "Yeah." And he told me this, and always carry over with me: never expect anybody to do anything for you. You can do it yourself. And I tell you, it just changed my life. You know, it give me discipline. And I know, like you mentioned, Nate, the word discipline has got such a bad reputation, but it's the way that you look at it, right? It's the way that you use it. Some people use it as a bad approach. Some others use it as a positive approach. Um, and it's how we receive the information and what do we want to do with that information.
So if I'm a tech in the field listening to this podcast and I hear you say, okay, one of the keys to maximizing my calls is to have discipline. I mean, that's a pretty wide breadth in terms of what that can mean for a tech in the field. Where would you say is a great place to start if you had to narrow down, like, all right, man, you could have discipline in 3,000 different areas of your life. But as a technician in the field right now, if you don't have discipline in this area, you're missing out. What would be your answer?
Well, first of all, discipline starts with training, right? So you got to continue doing the training, believe in the training, and applying the training. How to run a service call, how to run a maintenance call, how to communicate well with customer, how to present options. Do you know the technical aspect of it? Are you educated with the benefit of a water heater, of a water treatment? So you got to get educated and learn all this information so you can deliver that information to your consumers, to your customers, or to anybody that you're presenting, that they want to buy from you. Um, so and it's going to take personal time as well. It's not You cannot expect only that the company is going to do everything for you. They're giving you the resources. You got to be able to invest your personal time on it if you want to succeed on it. And again, training, follow up on the training, right? Your nose down, follow up on your nose, get disciplined about the information that is going to help you run and close service calls or any call. Even personally, right? It's going to help you personally get in discipline. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, it does. And I think another area of that discipline that, is easy to overlook is your process on the call, right? We've talked about this a time or two. We had Jason Walker on, who went over snipping up your process into 1,000 different pieces. And before you know it, all you have is confetti. And especially, when we've gone through 3 years of surplus calls and everybody's buying and everybody's calling and everything's great, it's easy to get lazy. It's easy to cut corners, not in a non-integrity way, but in just like you're not doing the best presentations, you're not doing the fullest amount of customer service because you don't have to. Like, it's the same thing that the automakers have just gone through. They didn't have to give you all the bells and whistles on cars because there was such a shortage in the auto market that people were overpaying on used cars. They were overpaying. I mean, for the first time in probably history, you could buy a new car for less than a used car. And so in that type of market, it's easy to cut corners. And so you get a bunch of fat, lazy, happy salespeople. And in our case, fat, lazy, happy technicians, plumbers, and electricians who've been cutting corners along the way. And Brian just mentioned this in one of our previous podcasts, but it's time to wake up, and part of that is the discipline to recognize that what was is not what will be, right? The 3 years of surplus that we've just gone through perhaps is now the 3 years of famine that we're about to go through. And I don't want to project negativity or say that the sky is falling at all, but it is a matter of discipline to look down and say, boy, the old belt isn't quite as loose as it used to be. Maybe I should get back to the gym. Maybe I should cut that 5th cookie out for dessert, tonight, and to start paying attention to the things that you've let slide and take them back. Take control of the things that you've surrendered, that you've given up, that you're no longer disciplined on, and refocus in those areas to say no longer.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, that was a great way to put it, Nate. yeah, it's a lifestyle. Discipline is a lifestyle, and you got to continue to do so. Even sometimes, but
That's a good point there with discipline being a lifestyle. It's like it's really difficult. Personally, I find it really difficult to remain disciplined out, quote unquote, at work, doing what I do for a living, when I let my physical discipline side fail, or when I'm not as disciplined being the husband or father that I want to be. And it's like all these things flow together and work together. So it's really difficult to be very successful in one area and be a total failure in all the other areas. Or maybe you can be successful in one area because you devote yourself fully to it, but then you're not living a great, really well-rounded life when you become like a one-trick pony. You have this thing figured out and don't do the rest of them well. Life is just so much better when you're disciplined in all areas. All that really means discipline, doing what you know you're supposed to be doing when you're supposed to be doing it. Just doing what needs to be done right here, right now. That's pretty much what discipline is.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Brian. And so kind of recapping here, key number 1, training, focus on it, believe in it, apply it. Key number 2, discipline in all areas of life, and specific to this podcast in terms of applying the training, believing in the training, applying it into the field, making sure that your process is dialed in, taking back control of those areas. Wrap us up with key number 3, Mario, to make the most out of our calls.
You gotta have consistency on everything that you do. It's going back to the basics that we've been talking about it so much, right? And keeping the consistency of following the steps, running every service call exactly the same way. As a company, it's funny that a lot of the internal employee that will request a specific technician to go do a work for a family member or for themselves. I'm a strong believer that we should send the same technician with the same quality, the same knowledge, and the same expectation. Doesn't matter who it is, right? But you got to believe in it, right? You got to have the consistency. Each one of you employees and managers, especially managers, they got to have that consistency of following the steps, holding themselves accountable, to make sure the technicians believe in the training, the discipline, and they are consistent on the way they're running every service call. Offering water treatment in every call. Why? Do you believe in water treatment? It's just as simple as BioBen. I'm a strong believer in BioBen. A lot of technicians they don't even offer it, but there's so many benefits that the customers can have out of it. But just offering or bringing a bottle inside the house on every call, consistent. When you're on call, this is a perfect example. When you're on call, I did it myself when I was in the field. I'm not saying anything that I haven't done myself. I was on call and I was tired. I was beat up. So I was trying to rush through the process. Well, guess what? I'm driving an hour there. I'm driving an hour back home. I better help that customer. I better make some money. So I'm going to run the call exactly the same if it was 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's just the little things that nobody likes to do. You got to have consistency on it. And I guarantee you will win. And I always say this, without discipline, you will never start. And without consistency, you will never finish. So you got to have both. You have to have all three, but mainly discipline and consistency, after you apply that training.
Mario, I hear what you're saying, and I want to take a guess at this. I would assume the answer is probably the same, but when you were a tech, you probably fell out of consistency a time or two and had to either pull yourself out by your bootstraps or have somebody kick you back into place. Now that you're behind a desk and you're coaching others and mentoring and bringing awareness to others and training, you probably see guys who are also experiencing inconsistency or who are running their calls, their lives, their trucks in an inconsistent manner. Is the answer the same for both you as a tech and what you would tell a tech now that you're, so much farther ahead? Do you reflect back upon, this is what I did when I found myself being inconsistent? Or have you come up with a new way that you found to be better that you apply to now people that you see are experiencing inconsistency?
That's a great question, Nate. I believe in the same system. It's like the way that we run a service call today is the way that we ran a service call 20 years ago, right? With the same process, the 7 super strategies, how to run a service call, the 8 step of how to run a service call, and so on. It's the same way today. The only thing that changes technology, that's to me, that's, so yeah, I can only speak for my experiences and share that with everybody else. I get their feedbacks, and I ask a lot of questions to my technician. Why they do it like this? Why they did it like that? Same thing with my branch managers and my regional managers. Um, I want them to recognize what they did wrong themselves, without me telling them this is what works for me. What works for me might not work for you, but it might give you a map on how to get better at it and not make the same mistakes.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you learn more as you step out of a truck and you take ownership over a team or over a peer group or something like that, where you have to be adaptable, right? Consistency doesn't necessarily look the same for everybody, and it's also not applied the same for everybody. It's we talk about this. Mike, our vice president of marketing and communications, like, he runs our call center, and we talk often about the skeleton of how to take a call. There's absolute elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that must be hit every single time when you answer that phone. But then there's a lot of flesh and tissue and muscles and tendons that you can put on that skeleton to make it your own flair, to make it your own way of doing things, your personality, your bent towards customers and whatever. As long as you have the skeleton there, we're good, right? We have that consistency. The flair and the personality, whatever you bring into it, great. Be adaptable and change to the client. That's fantastic. But when it comes to making sure that you have the key elements there, consistency is so critical. And making sure that even if you're coaching people or you're mentoring people, or even if you're just talking to your buddy in a truck, while you're driving down the road to your next call, his consistency might look a little bit different than yours. It might have a little bit of different flair to it. But at the end of the day, you both need to be honoring the fact that consistency is a key to the best outcomes of any call, and dialing in what are the things that are supposed to be there is a definite way to make sure that that is happening and happening well.
Yeah, good time to plug Weldon Long's book, The Power of Consistency, which I know the three of us have read.
Yes,
and
sir.
A couple buddies of mine in the trades are reading it right now, and just telling me how awesome it is. It's a great lesson on how powerful, like, doing what you should be doing over and over, having your process, and just being consistent, showing up over and over again is. Because wherever you're at listening to this, you ain't in prison. And that's where Weldon Long started with that book, man, and learning.
Well, hey, let's not limit our audience here, Brian. There might be some WebMD listeners out there. If so, please leave a review and make your username WebMD in cell.
WebMD in cell block C.
Oh, this has been good, Mario, and just highlighting those three things again. Key number 1, focus on that training. Key number 2, make sure that you have discipline, and key number 3, bring the consistency into your world. Good stuff today. As we bring things in for a landing here, if people are interested in learning more about you or about Service Minds, about plumbing, whatever it is, where's a great place to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
At the Authority Brands Convention in the first week in November. What's up? I'll see you there, buddy. Orlando.
I will see you there, man. I'm only a drive away, Got my email. My email is mario.martinez@serviceminds.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook. I follow Waste No Day. I follow you guys. So in Facebook and social media and things like that. Yeah, so I'm not a big social media guy, honestly. I do have a LinkedIn account, I get a Facebook account, and so on. But yeah, anytime they can reach out to Brian, Nate. You guys can give them my information, and I'll be more than happy to help anybody.
Awesome. Well, as we close out the podcast here, one final question I have for you. You mentioned at the start of this that you're a third-generation plumber. Inquiring minds need to know, is there going to be a fourth Martinez in the plumbing trade?
Well, my son is he's 14 years old now, and we'll see. He wants to be an MMA fighter, so we'll see.
Ooh.
Hey, it's real close to plumbing. It's right there.
Oh man, we'll see. I mean, it's a smart kid, but he's into fitness and martial arts. So whatever makes him happy.
What does he practice?
100%. I'm sorry?
What martial arts is he into?
Right now, he just started MMA fighting classes, so and wrestling.
Oh, nice. Okay,
that's great.
That's a good one to start with.
Yep.
Wrestling. I think wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu are probably the big three to do if you want to do MMA. Kickboxing, I'm sure helps, like Muay Thai, stuff like that. All right. Anyway, no MMA tangents here. Let's go, Nate.
Well, hey, thanks so much for being with us today, Mario. I love the simplicity of those 3 keys. And as we're in perhaps a slower time in the trades, it's always good to go back to the basics and look at 3 things that can really affect the outcome of your call. Thanks so much for being with us today and sharing that for our audience.
Yeah, it's great to finally have you on, my man. I can't wait to see you again in Orlando in November, and can't wait to have you on here again. Always a good time.
Definitely. It's been a great pleasure, guys. Thank you. Sorry it took so long. And I will see you. Hopefully I'll see you guys here soon in convention.
See you, buddy.
Hey, that's a wrap for this podcast. We hope that you enjoyed your time with Mario. Some really great and simple takeaways there, focusing on the elements of consistency, of discipline, and of course, training. If you're tech in the field, I would really encourage you to make sure that you have an open mind to those things, and that you are perhaps getting back into the habits if you slipped out of them, or forcing yourself into them if it's ones that you haven't started before. If you're sitting behind a desk, perhaps it's time for you to take up some new habits yourself and to draw your team into focusing on those 3 simple and yet effective keys to making sure you make the most out of every single call. If you're interested in learning more from Mario, he provided his information. We can also connect you. If you're in the southeastern portion of the country and you're not in the Service Mines area, I'm sure they'd love to talk to you as well. But for what we have today, it was a great podcast, and we sure hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure that you're leaving us a review and some comments to let us know what you thought about the show. And of course, any guests that you'd like to hear in the future, we'd love to hear from you. We're going to leave you now with our weekly challenge, which is the same every single week, to choose to wake up each morning and waste no day.